Welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Let me introduce myself. My name is Marco Morello, and I am a journalist. The title of our talk today embraces a series of concepts that became very actual during the pandemic. The title is Design, Society, and Digital Learning. What will survive to what? Before digging a little bit inside it, I have the pleasure to welcome the guests from several corners of the world that will help me today to discuss this topic with their perspective and their expertise. I have the great pleasure to welcome Tuba Kokaturk of Deakin University, School of Architecture and Built Environment of Geelong, Australia. Basically is not very far away from Melbourne. From New York, we have Christian Schneider of the Parsons School of Design Strategies. There is Michael Thomson that in UK established Design Connect. We have Carlo Forcolini of Raffles in Milan. And Riccardo Balbo, Academic Director of IED, Instituto Europeo di Design. Hi to everybody, and thank you for being here. So, as we all know, a lot of things changed very quickly in the last few months. There was an inevitable learning that obliged, first of all, to learn how to learn again, to choose the right tools to make accessible the mandatory lack of presence, the physical distance from students and teachers. If we think about it, it has been a huge effort of design in itself. There was the necessity of redesigning an environment that not everywhere has been quite static in the past, to rebuild the way of transmitting knowledge and skills, and to understand at a certain stage if they have been properly absorbed. Also, to get closer to that digital world that is the habit of any contemporary student. I guess we can agree that it has been a matter of different phases. There was an initial shock, an adjustment, a path towards what suddenly became what we are all calling a new normality. One of the things we will try to understand today is if this change will be forever or not, if it has been strong enough to build some foundations. What will remain of this earthquake and what will be lost? What was necessary and what was a consequence of the disorder of the emergency? Time will give the proper answers, but of course, we can try to make predictions. So I would start to involve my guests. I would start with Tuba Kokaturk. As I said, she works in Australia, despite she has the Istanbul background in her picture. But of course, she has also a wide and solid experience in Europe and also over 50 publications in her curriculum. Discussing with Tuba this topic in these days, you underlined that it's fundamental not to speak just about e-learning in itself, but to do what you called the curation of learning experience, to understand what can make the difference, the way in which e-learning is presented. So I would start from here, and if I can, I would quote, the nerd side of me allows me to quote what Steve Jobs said. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. And I guess we can apply this concept also to the learning platforms. Tuba.
Thank you, Marco. Just to give a bit of a background on my thinking in this domain about the concept of curation, what I wanted to propose. So actually online learning or distance learning has always been at the back of our minds for decades now, but never really gained so much momentum in design education until now, and never at such massive scale as it happened in recent months. But we really need to remember that the use of online learning in this time frame, not really a true reflection of the real potential of this learning mode. What I mean by this is that the primary concern for many design schools and educators during this time frame was to maintain the continuity, the business as usual teaching, and almost instinctively and naturally, what happened was to try to replicate the conventional design studio culture, the content delivery, as closely as possible through the use of any available technology almost that one could get their hands on, and in such short periods of time. And secondly, please bear in mind that the majority of these online tools, actually, if any at all, used in this time frame are not necessarily developed specifically for design learning. And thirdly, and maybe more importantly, I don't think the merits of online learning should be judged purely based on its ability to replicate or maintain the conventional studio culture. I think on the contrary, we should rather be exploring the added value it can bring to prepare designers for this ever-changing demands and expectations of the professional practice. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the bigger picture here and what really matters in the medium to long term. We are going through an unprecedented economic and social challenges, obviously, as we all know, globally, including an exponentially fast rate of technological change, not to mention what's going on with the COVID situation and the new dynamics of remote and collaborative working and so on. And in my opinion, the most important and the key question that we need to raise now is the following. How can we develop technologies and new pedagogical models, both online and offline, that can nurture the necessary competencies today's designers need? And can we, or how can we curate and orchestrate this experience? And I would like to leave it here and give some room for my fellow speakers.
Your point already introduced a lot of topics, and I hope we will discuss later. And as you said, it's totally right. Maybe for a need of simplicity, when we speak about e-learning, we treat it like something completely new, something brand new, but it's the opposite, because many of the tools were already there. Maybe some of us just ignore it, but they were there. For instance, we have here Schneider of the Parsons School in New York, and there the e-learning was already very present. It was already in the routine, in the everyday life of the institution. Just a little bit of quick background of Christian. He spent in New York the last 10 years, but he worked in London, in Milan, where he also teaches at the Politecnico, and he also joined universities in Europe and North America. Christian, my question is very easy, but I guess also very complex. In what the COVID changed the way in which you were already using e-learning? What basically remained the same, and what was new? What needed to be adjusted?
Yeah, thank you, Marco, and everyone. This complex question has both a simple and a complex answer. So, yes, I taught for some time online, and I worked with teams online. And I think for myself, I can say that teaching and mentoring online made me a better teacher and a better mentor. And this spring, I have been mentoring my colleagues while we were transitioning our courses online. And I could learn a lot from my colleagues. I would say that this spring we had an incredible human collaborative effort and a very fast response to keep going. So I see this in a very positive way because I think that with connecting all our expertise together, what we did in this spring, we will innovate learning in general. And I see it moving more towards, like Tuba already pointed out, to a learning system. And I see that we will use more of the new tools that we have, but not necessarily only technological, to create new learning communities. So I think the main point and the answer that I can give is that the collaborative effort and this connecting across all programs, but also across more universities to learn from each other. I think this collaborative effort is the first part of the answer. The other one that I would like to say is that what has been underestimated so far in online collaboration and in online teaching is the need and the opportunity to create community and culture when we collaborate online. So there are various tools, very simple tools for what we don't need a lot of technology. When we kick off a session or a class, we make short videos about ourselves, so we share a piece of ourselves. We can have people, students, interviewing other students. We can have digital diaries. We can share what we do on our G drives, and therefore really have these these local scenarios at our fingertips, and we can interact with those projects. So the access, I believe, is a very, very important point in that. I also have to say that New York, like Milan, is still in a rough situation. And by creating this safe space online for my students and myself, that was really a place where we could share our experience, which partially have been rough, from people that were traveling home, did not manage, were quarantined, lost a loved one. So it showed that these interactions, human interactions online, can be very, very intense. And I think that's the main learning curve for myself in this springtime, that really added on the things that we can do online. I always liked the idea very much because we travel less, we spend less time in hotel rooms. So I've always been advocating for that. And now that we had this total disruption, that, you know, without any borders, that everybody was in the same situation, showed us the opportunity and the potential to collaborate.
Absolutely. While I was preparing this talk, I reported a lot, of course, about e-learning in the last month, and I understood how typical it can be, but I also asked myself how different it could be if we had to speak about the design world and the design field. So I will try to pass my doubt, my question to Michael Thomson, that he is not a teacher, but he helps organizations in developing strategy of growth. And of course, I know that he also did with IED some projects about transdisciplinary design. So basically, try to integrate different fields with your work. My question, Michael, I understand that it's very tough. How do you deliver a proper design context in distance? I mean, how much do you lose when, in your opinion, when you're doing an online lesson, if you make a comparison to of course, an online lesson? And are there situations, topics, corners that cannot be transferred on an online experience? I just wanted to know that, and tell me what this week, this month teaches to you about this topic. Michael, the microphone.
Thank you for such a rich and complex question and an opportunity to speak. I have actually spent 5 years in the classroom as a qualified teacher some decades ago, and I work with a variety of design schools, including Kolding Design School in Denmark and Brunel University here in London. So although I work principally with design companies and other organizations on design management and design strategy projects, nevertheless, I do have a deep interest in learning and what learning is. And it made me you make me reflect on something I learned when I was training to be a teacher, which was about the writings of Ivan Illich, who talked about deschooling society. I'm sure some of you may remember that book. And it's amazing, in 1971, he was calling for advanced technologies to create what he was calling learning webs. Whereas in fact now, what we have is a web for learning. And some of his opportunity was, what he saw as the opportunity was to create situations where the task of delivering learning was handed over to the learner, so that the individual learners themselves became in charge of that journey. So it was about empowering people wherever they were with shared interests to be able to connect. And I think in a way, what's happening now with the COVID crisis is that opportunity to digitize or digitalize the learning experience is definitely being accelerated at this point of time. And I'm sure in 3, 4, 5 years time, we will look back at this point. If you think of the sigmoid curve, you know, that little bit of transition in the middle and the double S curve, that transition where everything was a little bit murky and difficult and challenging. So I think we are learning a lot at the present time, and there's probably still a lot to learn. I don't know if it's helpful, but in terms of dealing with specific working on design projects at the moment. So for example, working on a large project with a US client at the minute in partnership with another design company here in the UK, City ID. You know, we are finding that design function, the key thing about designing is actually it's very amenable to digital way of working, because you can share so much instantaneously, and you can remove time as a boundary, because people can be working across different time zones and so on. So I think in terms of the designing, it's not that difficult. And I think, as Christian was hinting, in fact, it can be enriched by the digital engagement. I think thinking about design as strategy and the strategic multiple stakeholder engagement that needs to occur behind a designing activity, that also is sort of amenable to that, in that you can quite quickly collect disparate groups of people together to be able to have the conversations that you do have with them. However, in that process, nevertheless, I think the digital communication, as we are doing now, tends to be one-to-one, even though there's 11 of us, 9 of us in the room, or 8 of us, whatever it is. And it tends to be transactional level of communication rather than something that's deeper or ties into the more holistic and, you know, centuries, aeons of development of the human ability to communicate at all sorts of spoken and unspoken levels. So I think some of that is lost. I don't know if that's a helpful provocation, Marco. Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, you made me think about also virtual reality and other ways to interact better. But maybe in the second part we will try also to discuss these topics. But yes, definitely it was a very interesting point. Now I'm very curious to hear the opinion of Carlo Forcolini of Raffles. He has a huge curriculum. He has been president of ADI and CEO of IED. He worked for some of the biggest names of Italian design, and these projects are in the collections of museums in New York, Paris, Milan. My question here is maybe the most difficult one, Carlo, so you will apologize me. How did you see design changing during the pandemic? I know that we could speak maybe weeks about this topic, so I ask you just to find the most relevant differences that you noticed.
So, thank you for the question. But before to answer, I'd like to say something about Tuba speech, because it was very interesting in the sense that I think that in the end we have to reinvent the proxemics. It looks an incredible contradiction, but with this new condition in teaching, we have to understand how the proxemics is changed in this virtual communication. That's it. So about the question of design today, after the pandemic. Today, design is at the center of the attention of as the saving discipline of the future. I think that for that there are several reasons. The first is that our reality in this period of COVID oscillates between scientific health data and rules deducted by politics. Mediation between these two poles in a social reality has been and still lacking. And design is the discipline that can mediate some of these effects, especially if the COVID phenomenon will be long-lasting. From my point of view, this is a great opportunity for design and all its areas, from product design to communication to services. Finally, design has the opportunity not to be just a part of marketing, but to become again the social discipline attentive to the values and real needs of society. From my point of view, this is a great moment for the world of design to show that design can do something different and useful, and that its historical function is something other than only aestheticization of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your point. And we will come back to that later, of course.
Thank you.
Riccardo, you are the mind behind the project that, I mean, the adjective says everything, smart school. I mean, it's the IED way to e-learning. And your attempt was to put together lessons in streaming, tutoring online, video material. But I really appreciated the way in which you introduced and presented this program. You said, we don't want to weaken the sense and the presence of the school as a community. Presence and community. Basically, it seems the opposite of social distancing, of those social distance. So I guess that it was intentional. I want to know, 3 months later, what is the balance? Were you able to hit the target, or were just amazing work?
Well, it's an ongoing process for sure. So we can try to write down a balance today, but actually I think it might be interesting to go at the very beginning. That for us has been, let's call it the day one. You know, what happened is that we found ourselves with schools that were not stopped but closed. That it's kind of very, very unexpected situation. So in 1 week we decided to, as a bet, we decided to jump on a platform that was like Google Meet, but we decided that without having any strong experience in that, and immediately like a fire brigade group, we decided to try to cope with the fire that was burning literally all the scheme, all the programs, all the methodology where we are using actually, not just because we want to use that, but because it's the methodology that in Italy is a constraint by the Ministry of Education that doesn't allow our kind of school like academies to use the online in a massive way. So after 3 months, I can tell that COVID has been our best learning in somehow. We have been learning that we can do something, and the principle, the rationale that has been used as a kind of lighthouse behind everything has been going back to the word of the etymology of university. University comes obviously from Latin, that is like staying in touch, everyone with everyone, universum. So it's a kind of universalita. So it's the way to make people being able to be connected with everyone. So that sense of community was the one that we decided was the must to be preserved. So preserving the sense of community and not being the one that is just transferring a service from the presential mode to the online mode was our main goal. Obviously, to do so, we have been transferring several things on the screen, but not just giving lectures, but making people, and that means students and teachers, able to meet in different modes, in different sessions, in different, applying different kind of methodologies. So, of course, now we have been facing limitations, like you can't teach fashion design and appreciating the different touch of textiles in a screen. So we have to preserve the relation between professors, putting your hands on, and students in a kind of environment that is creating a balance between what we can call the online mode and the presential mode. So at the very end, we have been putting in place, like, different tools, like strange equipment, homemade, that was letting students from home giving, showing their sketches to professors that were able, I mean, we like this expression, spaghetti homemade stuff, like do what you want, just get the aim, I mean, get the result in your hand and use what you have in your place. Then we have tried to cover, let's say, the presence of students in laboratories with a series of videos that were showing how to access machines and how to use different technologies. And then we are working now. We have been placing all our IT technologies, our informational technology laboratories, and our computers in cloud. So mainly what we are doing and what we want to do in the coming month, even if the COVID will be over, is keep with this alternative mode that is literally mixing and blending the good of the online with the, I would say, the core of being in a school, that is being in the school. It is a prosemic relational experience. So the school that has been designed in the Holy Quran with, you know, the madrasa, the Arabic school where students were all together sitting in front of a teacher. That's the sense of community that we have to preserve. At the very end, I'm closing. At the very end, I think that whatever is the innovation and whatever is the improvement that the innovation is bringing, you have to consider there is a loss. So our goal is not just jumping on the innovation, but is trying to keep the good of the innovation and to preserve at the maximum the loss that you can have. So this is actually the attitude that we are having with this.
Excellent point, Riccardo. You made me think that basically we are in a moment in which some things are basically not technically possible, because, for instance, you mentioned teaching fashion design, that you cannot, for instance, touch the textiles, but thanks to haptic technology, I'm doing an article just in these days about this topic. It will be possible from a distance to transmit vibrations, to transmit the temperature of a material. So also while during the first part we spoke about the possibility also to introduce virtual reality that could make the present much more effective. So of course this is an opportunity, and if we don't preserve it, I guess it could be a loss. I would like to hear from Tuba your opinion, because I mean about this fine-tuning that should be between the online as we see it and how it could become and the offline experience. What do you think about this balance?
Well, I was just thinking while I was listening to Riccardo and yourself, you know, going back in time, every time a new technology is introduced or a new possibility is introduced, the first thing we do is try to imitate the physical version of it, the analog version of it, right? The first thing we do is this. And we also look at this new thing from the perspective of the old. When cars were first introduced, we called them horseless carriages. And, you know, there are so many examples, and, you know, trying to fit a square peg into round holes, and we do it every time. But what I would like to share with you in my thinking is, I would like to propose, when the online learning, let's say, becomes a bit more advanced, let's say 30 years from now, maybe we will not need to touch the material between the tutor and the student while interacting online. Maybe the part of the education will be the student, wherever he or she is based, is going to have access to these materials, but the interaction between the tutor and student will be completely different. So what I'm saying is that we have to look at it from a changing roles of the tutors, changing interactions, changing contents. So we are not trying to replicate what is here. I think things will change exponentially when this becomes, I think, mainstream.
I totally agree with you. And when I spoke at the very beginning of our talk about the necessity of learning again how to learn, I guess that this could be applied more to teachers than to students. In some way, there was a gap from the old world and this, let's call, new world, but the digital space is what students are already very, very used to. So I would like to involve Christian. What do you think? That maybe this could be a big advantage, just because maybe it seems that teachers, school institutions are starting to speak the same language of younger students?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many tools. And as I said before, and Tuba pointed out, and Riccardo explained so nicely, there are these asynchronous and synchronous parts. And I think that the role of the teacher is more like, was a term in the medieval times, the master of ceremonies. And it's really orchestrating what you have and apply this to create new learning experiences. I also want to point out that in a similar way, or in the same way as each class and each group and each student was special and different when you were in the classroom, the same applies to online teaching. So I think it's very important that instead of having a one-size-fits-all way to teach, convey this asynchronous, so this pre-recorded and offline parts and the synchronous parts with focus interaction, it's good to do that with the group and with the class that you're working together, and also provide some leeway. You know, it's always a balance of framework and leeway. What do you have and what is then applied individually? So to leave some leeway to the students. So for instance, I definitely want them to use something like Slack without me, so that they have this free space, and the learning curves there are very, very high. So it's their own interaction and their own, how to say, space that they are creating. What I want to say is that the technology offers a lot, the way that we deal with it, and I think orchestrating is a term that describes that. Now has a very steep learning curve, and a lot of experience is being made. I think we will very soon already see, because we also had all the high schools that were transferring, and the middle schools and the elementary schools that were transferring their teaching online. So I think it will be very fast, not 30, but maybe 3 years, where we are more savvy and more experienced in, and also have more ease in using technology and get to what really matters, which is this universal community, possibly international. That's the challenge and opportunity that we have here. And I also wanted to add one last thing, is that in any corner in the world, there's a tailor and there's a woodshop. And so everything what we cannot do now in product development and fashion design, we can do locally. So there's also an opportunity to have this global access to local realities. And I think there's a potential also to connect us further.
Excellent. Discussing with this topic with Riccardo in these days, he had a very interesting image that involves horses. And Riccardo, can you tell it for us? And I know that you want also to comment on this point.
Absolutely, but in fact, this is a very good closing to what Christian was saying. I mean, I think is nothing to share with COVID. Actually, is nothing to share with the online teaching, but is the fact that we are running through a change of paradigm that is due to the kind of digital revolution that is having the strong impact on society in the last 20-25 years. So, in somehow the deep sense of teaching has been changing now. So what we still consider teaching, like I know things and you have to follow me in order to learn, that I was telling you yesterday, like I'm the horse and you guys have to follow me as young ponies or young horses, is now completely upset, and it's upside down. And for the fact that students generally have very, very strong and fast access to information, they are running like horses, and professors, they have to stay behind, and like driving a coach, they have to they have to direct students. So to change literally the assumption, to change the attitude. So you don't tell students do that, but you tell your students would be better if you have the option, choose the one option on the left rather than the one on the right. So you become a kind of shepherd for them rather than someone that they have to follow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would like to introduce another big topic. I mean, a huge one, because we are speaking a lot how to teach design, how to transmit the design concepts, but maybe we are not totally aware about how the role of design in some way could stitch to this situation. Well, in the past, we always assumed that design was the solution, that design was powerful, that design was the key to interpret the world from very different corners and perspectives. But maybe the proof was that design could be very weak in some ways. So the question, another time, huge for Michael Thomson. Michael, you will apologize, but when it's your turn, I always have these big questions. Why design hasn't been so powerful to prepare the world basically to face a situation like this? I mean, not from the very practical aspect, but just from to be good enough not to survive to it, but to stitch to it.
Yeah, I think the situation we find ourselves in is one that is very complex. It's very ambiguous. It's something that is very difficult to understand what might lie ahead. It involves so many, if not all, different parties. It is strategically challenging to understand how you might make decisions in a space like this. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of ambiguity. And I'm sure some people are starting to talk about what is the military thing? VUCA, is it? VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And there's a guy, Bob Johansson, did a really nice thing where he took the acronym and he changed it around. And he said, look, vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. And those are the things that designers bring into this space naturally. So I think the other thing that design brings is a level of optimism actually about shaping better futures and shaping better quality of life. So I think in terms of the mentality or the sensibility of the design mind, then I think it is a good place to be able to think holistically about what's happening just now, whilst at the same time being able to think outside of the problem as well, and to try to reframe these challenges as opportunities. And I think designers do that all the time, don't they? So, you know, if we're reframing, I think, was it someone else said that one of the Booker Prize winners said that the pandemic is a portal, in the sense that this is opening a portal for us to be able to see a new opportunity or a new future that would open out ways in which design can play a more powerful role. How systems and policy commission and what it's doing is talking about resilience and recovery. Of course, resilience and recovery are about what? Recovery is about what's needed now. Resilience is something that we need to build in for the future. This may not be the last. I think there's a post-COVID world. I think we have a with-COVID world. So I think the design approach to thinking strategically about unknown situations with ambiguity lends itself very closely to helping others in trying to make change for the better coming out of this situation. I mean, there's more I could say, but
we'll go back to from the words of Michael, Carlo. The next question is for you. It seems that design seems like a mindset. It's despite being a series of tools, it's also like it seems like a way of thinking, a way of approaching things. So, with your experience, Carlo, what do you think? How you should change the way of teaching it, the way of transmitting it, just in this with COVID era, as Michael said?
So I have to say that from my point of view, design is not just only a profession. It is a way of life, it is a way of thinking. You are a designer even when you are sleeping. So in this way, I have not answered in the sense that my question is that 50% of the training to be a designer is correct, is an academic way. But the other 50% is how we are able to do this academic learning as more as a personal experience of the students. So I'm sorry, I am Socratic. And I think that the knowledge is possible to transmit just personally. No? But I also realize that we are in 21st century and that we have to think about new technology and so on. But technology are just technology, are just instruments. And we have not to pretend that the instrument became the value. It's completely different question. When we are thinking about instrument, we can say what we want. We can change our model of teaching, our didactic way, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, our reality is quite traditional. I mean, if you say how the different nations has to face the pandemic COVID is unbelievable. We felt ourselves in the 14th century, nothing different, with the same mentality. What happened? We have a science, we have all fantastic technology and so on, but has been enough that one nothing changed our world. And it was just less than 3 months that the economy of the entire world is in crisis. So I have not a solution, I have to say, but I think that the problems are very, very big, and we have to invent something different. On the other hand, this is our mission as a designer.
Excellent, excellent. So, Tuba, I maybe have a very similar question for you, and Carlo helped me to make it even better. Did design pay the price of any misunderstanding about its mindset, its role, or basically it has to stay the same and approach the technology just as a tool, just like an instrument, and that's it?
I'm actually quite optimistic about the role the design already started playing and will keep playing also into the future. Because of two things that's happening, and I think that might be relating to your question as well. One is the change of the perception about what design is over the last century, but also the perception of who the designer is and what is the role of design. I think those two changes are really exceptionally and really important. Just to give you an idea, I mean, when we look back to the 20th century, design was, for most of the 20th century, design was understood as mainly the design of products which serve specific sectors and industries. We design beautiful products designed for industrial design, buildings designed for architecture and construction sectors, cars designed for automotive sectors, and we have built these entire cultures and workflows and disciplines and educational systems which served this rather compartmentalized and product-focused understanding of the world and the design profession and the designer himself or herself. But when we fast forward to today, for maybe the last decade or so, we are seeing, as you also outlined, and also other speakers, there's a growing recognition of design as a powerful methodology. But I don't think we can solve this mystery by just defining design as a powerful methodology. Something is really interesting happening here. That's the other change. Today, we're not just designing things. We are shifting from designing things designed by individual designers towards designing as a team and designing for and within a system. And this is a huge difference. So we're not just designing cars, we are designing urban mobility systems and creating new interactions between cars and the people and environments. We're not designing telephones, we're designing mobile communication devices connected to other devices, compatible with other applications, triggering new business models. So everything is becoming so much interconnected. So I cannot even think of one individual, designer designing all of these. So, and when we start designing systems, the way a designer should approach the design has changed as well. We have to rethink how we formulate our problems. And I think the key is really, how do we go back and reformulate? Design is only as good as the problem that it responds to, in my view. And unfortunately, although these developments are happening in the real world, in industry, in application world, this is not really being reflected in the design education in many schools, as far as I have been experiencing. And I think that would be the next revolution.
I would like to involve Michael maybe on this topic, because he has a competence about the interdisciplinary role of design. Michael, one big value that is very important in this moment is, of course, the sustainability, the green, the importance of green in the choices that you do. The e-learning, the smart working, the way in which it changes the way we live, can in some way be helped by this new situation, well, by this, to use again your words, with COVID world. I mean, this could be a push, this could be an opportunity.
Yes, I think it could be an opportunity. I very much appreciate Tuba's really nice evocation there of the way in which design is changing. And of course, for something to change, our language changes about it. So the language that Tuba is using about design now is not language we would have been using 15 years ago, or perhaps even less. So that ability, it's the same for organizations. Organizations change when the language changes. But one of the things that Tuba did mention was the designing systems, or designing within or for systems, which of course then leads to systems of systems. And she also mentioned designing in teams. And I think that the multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach to thinking about design as a very multifaceted, multi-skills based focus for creative and solution-oriented energy is something that's very challenging, but also very exciting. And I think the idea of transdisciplinarity is coming of age, as it were. It's not an entirely new term, but I think because of where we are now, that notion of finding commonality of language, common ground, the opportunity for people to share through their language sets, opportunities to find new solutions or new avenues to explore is very exciting. And I think just to sort of take it a little step without taking the whole conversation back there, I think that idea of teams and team working is one of the areas where there is still, I feel, a loss when you come to online learning. And I don't know that just a balance between the analog and the digital, or the online, offline, or the the synchronous or asynchronous or whatever, I don't think that is yet able to help us really think about what happens in a team when you're actually trying to find the things that you don't know, and you're trying to open out opportunities for new horizons to emerge that weren't even invented at the start of a conversation because of what happens in the dynamic of a group. So I think, I remain optimistic. I think humankind is astonishingly inventive. We've had terrible, terrible tragedies, even in a global scale, if you think back to the influenzas at the end of the First World War and so on. And somehow or other, humankind's ingenuity seems to triumph through that. And of course, I'm not advocating for a second that design has all the solutions. It most certainly does not. But I think design as a mentality, as an approach, as Carlo was helping us to understand, is something that can help enable better approaches to thinking about challenges that we don't have any answers for.
Excellent, excellent. I have a question for Christian. I think that another big topic is the new concept of distance. Maybe it could be totally acceptable now for a student that lives everywhere in the world to sign up for a school that is based in New York and attend it, all the processes of it online. So maybe this could be spread the knowledge a little bit more. If you want to look for positive aspects of this new situation, this could be one. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. In our master, we allow any discipline similar to the D school also, and any background, any level of seniority, and anywhere in the world. And we have this both, online and offsite, on-site. So I wanted to follow up on what was just being discussed, which I can sympathize very much, which are really the key points, and then also leads, how do we collaborate as a group of students, including the professor as the student, as Riccardo pointed out. Just an example, somebody who manufactures a car has the awareness that social innovation, social change and urban development will change the perception of the core product. And it's embedded in a system, as Tuba pointed out, which is not the core competence of this manufacturer. So we need to outsource and we need to integrate the competencies in those areas. And so we need to include them in a very established knowledge body. And I think that their design has some history now. The marketing-friendly term design thinking really comes from designers managing various inputs from engineers in marketing and human factors to develop a project and to lead that process and to engage those various perspectives and get them together to develop something that this time, as we have to get used to the fact that our future is not predictable and we need to embrace the complexity, that there is a whole spectrum between good and bad, even though we are polarized, there's a whole alphabet between A and C. And I believe that the process that we're in and where we have been contributing, will continue to contribute as designers, is that we make use of these various perspectives and bring them together in order to come up with flexible solutions. And this happens also and should happen in the classroom because there we do have the opportunity and have had the opportunity to bring together people that come from different corners from the world. In design, we have the opportunity that we can work with any possible discipline and collaborate and see strategic design as either something that you add on or that becomes your core discipline. So with that, I want to say that this diversity, this heterogeneity is really it's our food. It's what we need to develop products, services, and now also systems.
Right. I just spoke about distance and as Christian just said, the future is quite unpredictable. This pandemic showed us that there is a lot that we don't know. But what we know for sure is that this concept of space changed a lot. That the square meter is very important now, and it can be crucial in determining the quality of life in our homes, outside. So I would like to listen the opinion of Carlo and Riccardo about this topic. How design should approach this new concept of space, where basically it could be really crucial and vital the way in which you consider and project it. Carlo.
Well, I think that without the technology that we are using now, for example, the last months in pandemic lock created a mass suicide. Well, I mean, it's been a fantastic experience because we were like in the prison but not just close in our four wall, but we had the world, no? We can reach everybody, everywhere, and so on. And this is a fantastic effect of this technology, for example. But I think that the question of space is going to change after this pandemic. No, for example, I had a coffee 2 hours ago in the small bar downstairs, and I realized that it was an unbelievable situation because all the major bars in Italy are small and very cozy, no, with very, very warm hospitality and so on, like the restaurant and so on. But if you follow the question of pandemic, it is foolish. We have to close everything. And that is something which is a strong contradiction, because individually we are able to go everywhere in just 1 sec. We are in Australia talking with this fantastic woman, but when I going down, I am in a small bar where it's possible to drink a coffee just in 2. So that means that the question of space, the space became elastic, became is going to have another concept. It's not just geometric, our space. It's much more than this. It's more mental space. And maybe with this mental space, we are able, through the technology, to stay in 40-meter apartments and survive as a human being.
Sure.
But
sure.
Carlo, sorry if I'm interrupting, but this is very interesting. Carlo, in fact, I think that on the one hand, we have to consider all the smart working dimension that made our homes very big or very stretched. So on the one hand, we have a new vision of space, that is the multi-purpose spaces that are our homes, that are becoming something different. So you live your space in a different way. So you open up from within, you open up your space. On the other side, to follow your example, bars, cafe, restaurants, but I would like to add trains, aircraft, ships, metro line, taxi, shops, retails, schools, hospitals, cinema, catwalk, whatever is becoming completely small, because we have to be less. It's a matter of density. And when it comes a matter of density in the built environment, immediately it becomes a fact of economy. So it's the value of real estate is rising. So in a way, I think that COVID has been a big issue, isn't a big issue, but actually it's a kind of catalyst that has been able to bring to the surface the weaknesses of our system. So we were traveling like sardines on airplanes, and now perhaps we have to reconfigure the business model of aircraft and our being business companies.
If I can say, just yesterday, I saw a project of my ex-student, which is an American one, Joseph Forakis. I consider young, but he's already 50. And he showed me a fantastic project for a supersonic helicopters for Leonardo company. Leonardo is a huge Italian company to produce helicopters. So it was fantastic. It surprised me because this is the question that we are talking about. So the space inside of this supersonic helicopter is very, very small. But he did a project that when the people are inside there, they look everywhere around the world. They look the sky and so on. They are close, but through the video camera, they felt themselves like to be in an open space, in the nature. And I think that this, in the end, will be the future of the concept of the space, even in the living situation, the normal situation.
So, Carlo, you have to agree that at the end, the technology will play a big role also in redesign the space.
Yes, absolutely, but it's just an instrument, no more than that.
Sure. I guess that sadly our time is over. So before we go, let me thank my guests for being here today. Thanks to Tuba Kokaturk, Christian Schneider, Michael Thomson, Carlo Forcolini, and Riccardo Balbo. It has been a really interesting conversation. Thanks a lot for all the viewers for their attention, and arrivederci.
Thank you to you, Marco. Bye-bye.
You.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you, Marco.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.